323 BC Babylon, an empire spanning from Greece to India, grinds to a halt. Its master, the man who forged this colossal reality, lies prostrate. He has not fallen by a Persian sword, nor by an Indian arrow, but by a fever consuming his body. For over a week, the Macedonian elite watched their king decline. But this end could not be simple. The question that has haunted historians for 2,300 years is clear and brutal, yet profoundly political. Was the man who believed himself a god the victim of a conspiracy, slowly murdered by poison administered by his own generals? The Digital Historian presents Alexander the Great. To understand if Alexander was a victim of toxin or disease, we must trace the path that led him to that agony in Babylon. His life was a chronicle of self-imposed destiny, a relentless journey of over 18,000 kilometers from the steppes of his native Macedonia to the limits of the known world. His rise was a whirlwind of blood, ambition, and political propaganda. This is not just the biography of a conqueror. It is the story of a man who decided to become a legend in his own lifetime, and the immeasurable price he paid for forcing his own divinity. Macedonia, 356 BC. Alexander's birthplace was not the refined heart of Hellas, but a frontier kingdom, mountainous and arid, often despised by the southern Greeks as a land of barbarians. However, his father, Philip II, had transformed that kingdom. Through conquest and rigorous military organization, Philip created the Macedonian phalanx, a disciplined war machine and the most formidable force in the Eastern Mediterranean. Philip ensured Alexander did not start from zero. He bequeathed him a prepared army and a mission to invade Persia. Alexander's education was marked by two conflicting influences: Philip's geopolitical pragmatism and the fervent, almost violent ambition of his mother, Olympias. She instilled in him a sense of superior destiny and heroic lineage. This family tension was resolved with blood. When Philip, tired of Olympias, married a new woman, Alexander's succession was threatened. Shortly after, in 336 BC, Philip was assassinated by his bodyguard Pausanias under the shadow of political intrigue. Although Pausanias's immediate motive was personal, the evidence always pointed to the enormous benefit gained by Olympias and Alexander himself upon ascending the throne. The instability of the succession in Macedonia was the immediate prelude to a great conquest. Alexander, ascending the throne amidst chaos, inherited his father's vision, but with an ambition fueled by literature. Educated by Aristotle himself, Alexander saw himself as the heir to Homeric heroes, aspiring to emulate the glory of Achilles. The love for honor, infused by ancient Greek culture, became the driving force of his politics. Before embarking for Asia, the young 20-year-old king needed to consolidate his power over the reluctant Greek city-states that had only recently been subjugated by Philip. When Thebes rebelled, Alexander acted with calculated brutality, serving as a shock to the Greek political system. Thebes was besieged, captured, and razed to the ground in 335 BC, and its citizens were enslaved. This massacre served a double purpose: to terrorize other cities like Athens into submission, and to guarantee his Macedonian army and Greek allies that vengeance against the Persian Empire was the undisputed priority. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont, the strait separating Europe and Asia. His first symbolic act was to visit Troy, the land of his hero. There, Alexander performed sacrifices, and instead of claiming Paris's treasures, he claimed Achilles' shield. By driving his spear into Asian soil, he declared his mission a war of revenge and conquest, laying the epic foundations of his dominion. Alexander's invincibility relied not solely on his charisma, but on the constant application of a superior tactic known as hammer and anvil, a perfect synergy between the phalanx and his heavy cavalry. The first major clash in Asia took place at the Granicus River. Alexander met the Persian satraps, who held a geographical advantage by being entrenched on the opposite bank. Parmenion, his most experienced general, advised waiting for a better moment or terrain, wary of an immediate assault. However, Alexander dismissed prudence, declaring he would feel ashamed if a little stream like the Granicus stopped him. Leading his cavalry personally, the hammer, Alexander charged across the river, while the Macedonian phalanx, the anvil, pinned the infantry at the ford. The cavalry penetrated and dismantled the Persian lines. The victory was not just a military triumph, but a psychological blow that reinforced the narrative of Macedonian invincibility. The next major step involved Darius III himself, the great king of Persia. Before the encounter, Alexander suffered a personal setback, falling gravely ill after swimming in the Cydnus River, an incident that left him temporarily incapacitated. While he recovered, the great Greek general in Persian service, Memnon, who had advised a scorched earth strategy and naval warfare, died unexpectedly, removing a critical threat to Alexander. Darius, believing his numerical superiority was insurmountable, opted for direct confrontation. He committed a fatal strategic blunder by choosing the narrow field of Issus. This geographical bottleneck, bounded by mountains and the sea, neutralized his overwhelming numerical advantage. Estimates suggest Darius's army outnumbered Alexander's by more than 5-1. Alexander, exploiting the terrain that favored his phalanx's maneuverability and his cavalry charge, broke the Persian center. Darius, described by historians as an incredible coward, fled the battlefield immediately. The flight of the great king was the symbolic collapse of Persian resistance in the West. After Issus, Alexander consolidated the Mediterranean coast, including the brutal sieges of Tyre and Gaza, to secure his rear and open the way to Egypt. In Egypt, Alexander was crowned pharaoh and consulted the oracle of Siwa, where he was confirmed as the son of Zeus Ammon. This propaganda was essential for his leadership in Asia, reinforcing the belief that divinity was on his side. The final confrontation took place at Gaugamela. Darius, learning from his mistake, had prepared the ground for his scythed chariots to maneuver. Alexander responded with an oblique formation, considered his tactical masterpiece. He executed a flanking maneuver to the right, drawing out the Persian cavalry. This action created a gap in the Persian forces. Alexander, commanding the hammer, executed a devastating charge through that gap, heading straight for Darius's position. Darius fled again, sealing the fall of the Achaemenid Empire. The victory was undisputed, allowing Alexander to enter the Persian capitals of Babylon, Susa, and finally, Persepolis. The conquest of the Persian Empire not only granted Alexander wealth, but also initiated a profound leadership crisis, where his enemies ceased to be external and became internal. Upon entering the Persian capitals, Alexander began adopting distinct Oriental customs. The turning point was Persepolis, the ceremonial center of the empire. Alexander permitted the looting of the city and ordered the burning of the royal palaces. Historical accounts offer two versions of this act. One, that it was calculated revenge for Xerxes' destruction of Athens. The other, that it was an impulsive act during a royal drunken stupor, incited by the courtesan Thais. This ambiguity is fundamental. Was Alexander the Greek avenger or the future Persian monarch? The massive burning was a slight to Macedonian heritage, and the first symptom of an identity shift that would isolate the king. As Alexander pushed into what is now Afghanistan, his strategy of integrating Persian nobles and adopting Oriental dress generated resentment among his old Macedonian companions. Paranoia, inherent in a king who rules by force, took hold of him. The first great purge was that of Philotas, son of Parmenion, the general who had served Philip and Alexander for decades. Philotas was accused of covering up a conspiracy. Alexander had him executed, but the danger of revolt from Parmenion, who controlled significant forces, was too great. In an act of strategic terror justified as anticipation, Alexander sent messengers to assassinate Parmenion. The elimination of the two most influential members of Philip's old guard was a ruthless act of self-preservation, crucial to establishing Alexander's authority as a king above individual justice. The cultural conflict reached its breaking point with Alexander's attempt to institutionalize proskynesis. This was a Persian custom involving ceremonial prostration before the king, but for Greeks, it was reserved solely for gods. Alexander, embracing his status as the son of Zeus, insisted on the practice to culturally unify his court. The historian Callisthenes refused, defending Greek identity. But it was Clitus the Black, an old companion who had saved Alexander's life at Granicus, who dared to criticize the king openly during a banquet. Clitus contrasted Alexander's achievements with those of his father Philip in a moment of drunkenness. The tension between old Macedonian loyalty and the new despotic monarchy exploded. In a fit of fury and intoxication, Alexander grabbed a spear and killed Clitus. The regret was immediate and profound. Alexander locked himself away for 3 days in gut-wrenching mourning and self-loathing. The death of Clitus was not just a murder, but the manifestation of the king's profound psychological fragility under the pressure of self-imposed divinity. Despite the purges, Alexander's ambition knew no bounds. His target was India. After defeating the formidable King Porus at Hydaspes, a victory that introduced war elephants into the Hellenistic arsenal, Alexander and his army reached the Hyphasis River. Here, for the first time, the invincible conqueror was defeated, not by an army, but by exhaustion. His soldiers were spent, having marched over 18,000 kilometers in 8 years. They categorically refused to cross the river, knowing that colossal Indian armies waited beyond. The refusal of his generals was a humiliating blow to his pride and a failure of strategic will. Alexander built 12 giant altars as a monument to his frustration and, accepting defeat, decided to return. Instead of taking the easiest route back, Alexander chose a path through the Makran Desert. His motivation was to challenge the impossible. The march back became his worst strategic blunder. The Makran was a hell of heat, thirst, and logistical failure. More men were lost to the desert, starvation, and disease than in all his battles combined. The king returned to Babylon with an exhausted body and a compromised immune system, setting the stage for his final vulnerability. In 324 BC, personal tragedy struck with the sudden death of Hephaestion, his closest companion and possibly his lover. Alexander's grief was of Homeric magnitude. It is said his mourning was extravagant, and his alcohol consumption increased dramatically. In May of 323 BC, back in Babylon, the cycle of exhaustion and excess culminated. Alexander, at a banquet hosted by Medius, drank excessively and experienced sharp pain, as if pierced by a spear. His health declined over 11 days. The theory of poisoning emerged immediately. This idea was fueled by a controversial document, a pamphlet listing the guests and implicating the king's rivals, especially the family of Antipater. The motive was clear. They feared the return of a paranoid Alexander, capable of executing old loyalists just as he had done with Parmenion. However, academic rigor forces us to confront the pamphlet with the Royal Diary, which records a gradual illness marked by high fever and slow deterioration. Modern diagnosis offers natural causes: malaria, endemic to the region, or typhoid fever, transmitted by contaminated food or water. Although poison, possibly veratrum album, can never be ruled out entirely, the evidence suggests that the poisoning narrative was likely post-mortem political intrigue used by his successors. Alexander died on June 10th, 323 BC. When asked to whom he left his vast empire, he replied with a fatalistic phrase that summarized the failure of his project: "To the strongest." The answer was an invitation to chaos. His successors, the Diadochi, tore the empire apart. His mother Olympias, his wife Roxana, and his son Alexander IV were all murdered. The empire fragmented into the Hellenistic kingdoms. Alexander forged the largest empire the world had seen, but he could not transcend human weakness. His death remains a reminder that even the man who challenged mortality was only human. If this deep dive into the Macedonian hammer kept you hooked and you want more rigorous studies of military history and the figures who changed the world map, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave us a comment. What other historical mystery would you like to see analyzed in detail?